Alright, now we're going to talk about a bit more efficient way of dealing with hair and fur. So let's just select our character here and we're going to delete hair and fur from her. Now I want to zoom in on the side a bit and we're going to, above the Turbo Smooth, add an Edit Poly modifier. That's going to allow me, at the polygon level here, to select a region of polygons where we want to grow the hair from. But we're not going to keep them on the head. So after I get a selection made here, we're going to copy these off to a new object. So we're going to use the detach tool, we find it here, and the detach options. So we're going to go to the settings and we're going to detach as a clone. So we're going to copy this scalp object off to its own new object. Alright, so now we have a brand new object. We can delete the edit poly from the stack because we really don't need it there. So now the scalp object is what we're going to use to grow hair and fur. So now with that object selected, we're going to go to my modifier list and apply hair and fur. Now hair and fur then grows just from that given object rather than the entire body. It also allows us to go back to the body and make any changes that we want without affecting our growth object. So now let's go back to that growth object. We're going to go in here and we're going to find our styling tools. So we're going to go into style hair, and to start with here, we want to make it a bit longer in spots. So we're going to make it a bit longer on the back of the head and around the sides. Quite a bit longer right there, but we're getting too much down here. So let's bring that back. All right, so that looks pretty good. All right, so then we'll go to our translate tool. And we'll start to bring all of this down. Maybe a little bit long over here. So I try to use the edge of the brush because the center of the brush has the most power, but depending on the size of the brush, you can be adjusting through the object and grabbing hair on the back of the head or other areas that you really aren't intending to grab. Now, if we had isolated the scalp, some of this would be a little bit easier also. That view cube. Alright, so once we've got it at least generally styled the way we want, come in here so we can see a little more. We're going to use puff roots. Puff roots is going to, again, make it so that the hair pushes up out of the scalp object and allows us to kind of push it away from the mesh. So as we do that, we can go back to translate and continue to make adjustments. Alright, maybe down there, let's go back to our scale tool and scale that back down a bit. Alright, that looks pretty good. We'll go to finish styling, and then we'll go back to that frizz parameter and make sure the frizz is down a bit more so it doesn't get too crazy out there at the tips. Now, leaving this up a bit isn't going to be a bad thing. It leaves some variation, some randomness to the way the hair flows. It still flows in all the general direction that we've styled it into, but it's got some randomness to it. Let's go find our multi-strand. Here, let's zoom out a little bit and let's render one here. So multi-strand is going to allow us to basically make it feel like this is coming from a bit more of an area rather than everything coming from a single point. So as we zoom in here now, we've added our count of multi-strand to 3, and as I increase the root splay, you'll see each hair basically spreads out into 3 hairs. As I increase the count, we'll basically be just bringing more hairs to a clump. So we'll get a little bit more of a clumpy look to the hair rather than everything coming from single points and single strands. It doesn't have tip splay turned on, so everything that starts as a single hair and just has the roots splayed still ends at more of a point. Again, it'll look pretty clumpy. Alright, now we're going to look at one more thing, and because the hair right now is not casting shadows, when we look at that last rendered view, we're not getting any darkening between the hair strands or onto the scalp. So we want to create light so that we have some hair shadows happening. So we're just going to make a target spot, come out here on the top view, and we'll drag in a spotlight, and then we'll move that up a bit. And then we're going to turn on shadows. And shadow maps, we want to have the bias set pretty low. The bias kind of relates to how accurately the shadow sticks to objects. The size will bring up a little bit, and the sample range will also bring up a little bit. The sample range kind of relates to a Gaussian blur filter, so it's going to soften the edges of the shadow, while the size is basically one dimension of a square image that's cast back over all of your objects. So the higher the size is, the higher the resolution or quality of the shadow map. And then the sample range just softens it up. So let's take a look at that. Now, here we don't have our hair shadows, are not part of this light at this point. So we're going to go to the rendering tab and then effects. We're going to select hair and fur, and we're going to tell the hair and fur to be added to that spotlight. There's our hair light attributes now. So it's turned on to light the hair, and the resolution and fuzz are basically set up specifically for each light. I generally don't want to use all lights at render time, because we're going to make another little Omni light over here to illuminate the other side of the face, and maybe we don't want that light to actually cast shadows, so we don't want it to illuminate the hair objects. So let's take a look at that now. So first of all, it computes the hair shadows, and then when it renders, we get shadows onto our object from that hair. So then when hair fur renders, we get a much different look to it because of the way the light actually interacts with the hair objects, and then each one of the hair strands actually casts shadows back onto other hair strands. It makes it look like it's got a lot more volume and a lot more density. From there, let's just zoom out just a bit and render one more. So from a distance that we're actually going to be looking at this object, the hair looks pretty good. Now, we may actually want to turn on shadows for that Omni light so that the other side of the head isn't, quite so bright. And the Omni light is definitely, both of our lights are way too bright. For now, though, we can see how it works and cast shadows for our objects. All right, in the next one, we're actually going to talk about using spline objects to sculpt and style hair rather than using the sculpting engine.